On today's episode of Whack-a-Doodle, the guy who got fired had a little more to say. It was sketchy. That's not looking good. Kid's lemonade stand, you know.
You can't just run it like an Etsy shop, babe.
Trying to help her one and only son. Welcome to Whack-a-Doodle. So you may have been asking, hey, why are you picking on the pages so much? There were other people involved in this Dragon Curve Duzic lawsuit too, right? And yeah, there were. However, those people have less of an online footprint, so less to find. They are involved in fewer lawsuits, and honestly, they're just not as interesting. However, there is a little bit I can find out about Ethan Eden, so I'll give you that information here. So if you recall from the first episode, Ethan Eden was the probable co-owner of DiFi and Dragon Curve. He allegedly made the original deal with David Duzic to hire his son. He did give a deposition, so that's how we know information about him, but he was not present at the trial to give any testimony for some reason. It's weird, I don't know why. He actually owns or has started a lot of different companies. Based on these companies' website descriptions, they all seem to do really similar, if not identical stuff, which is generally fintech, big data, finance related. Why there are so many companies is unclear to me. I don't understand the point of making companies and merging companies and acquiring companies, like not my forte. But we can go back and look at all of them, see if we can find anything interesting. So working backwards chronologically, we have the latest, our Dragon Curve and DiFi, of which Ethan Eden is probably a co-owner of both. This is what we talked about in episode 1. Dragon Curve is now defunct. DiFi does still seem to exist, though I can't confirm a business entity filing for it because the name is just too freaking generic. There's so many digital, financial, and similarly named companies. So anyway, let's go back, shall we, to Chapter 1, Open and Shut. So I found some solid information about the company that preceded DiFi, and it was called Open Finance. Open Finance existed before Ethan Eden came into the picture. It looks like around December 2018, Open Finance was acquired by DiFi. And evidently at this time, both Ethan Eden and Michelle Page were owning/running DiFi. And at that time, there were 2 original owners of Open Finance. One of these original owners stayed on with the company, it looks like just as a general employee, and then the other owner was terminated. It said by Ethan Eden, kind of fired him. So that's where we're at. It looks like this was an actual successful acquisition of a company for the most part. Looks like everything was going well until 2024, and a bank filed a lawsuit against the 2 former owners of Open Finance for defaulting on the loan. So, looking through the transcripts, according to both of the former owners, DiFi was supposed to take on all the loans, all the equity, etc. from Open Finance. So the fact that in 2024 they weren't being paid, the bank went after the original people who were on the loan, which is the 2 owners of Open Finance. They talked to the guy who still worked at DiFi as an employee, and he said he hasn't had anything to do with loans anymore. He just hasn't really thought about it, which isn't great. The guy who got fired had a little more to say. He said that Eden and Page had paid him and the other members with promissory notes, and that's how they bought Open Finance. But they weren't obligated to pay anyone for the company equity while there was still a balance on this loan, the loan that wasn't paid. So the guy that got fired speculates that DiFi deliberately kept the loan open with a substantial balance so that it wouldn't have to begin to pay him and all the others for the equity they said they were purchasing. They said that they contacted Page and Eden and DiFi in general for business records, but nobody responded. So shocking, guys. I can't believe that They were unable to come up with business records for companies. I've never seen that happen before. So, from the way the terminated guy says, it was sketchy. And they were doing weird things with loans and equity and promissory notes in order to avoid paying people out for when they purchased the company. But he was terminated, so perhaps he has a chip on his shoulder? Maybe they're wrong. Who knows? One thing I thought was interesting was that the loan didn't default until 2022, which means somebody was paying the loan from 2018 until 2022, right? I don't know who. According to both of the former owners of Open Finance, it would have been Ethan and Paige. And one thing we do know is that 2022, Ethan and Paige were in a little bit of financial trouble, at least, because the whole Dragon Curve IIS thing fell through in episode 1. 2022 was not really a successful time for DiFi, so it's interesting that that's when the loan stopped being paid. In the end, 2 previous owners of Open Finance were held responsible for the loan payment, which was around $300,000. There was no trial or jury. It was just a summary judgment from the judge, which, oh my God, if they're being truthful and, that was part of the buyout and Open Finance, doesn't exist anymore, that's crazy that they were held responsible. And, this lack of a paperwork is seriously a problem. But anyway, that's what I can find about the one company, Open Finance, which he acquired. There is another company. Chapter 2. 76 markets led the big parade. So around the same time as Eden started DiFi, he also started another company called Market 76. And it looks like this also does still exist. My information about Market 76 comes from articles from 2013 from FPPad and RIA Biz. I've never heard of this before. Can someone in the field please tell me if these are credible institutions for getting news from? They both interviewed Eden, and one of them starts, "If you're a Yaley with a name like Ethan Eden, what do you do for a follow-up act? You take what your stockbroking mom did for a living and build on it through innovation." There's a lot of damn words to say nepo baby, but alright, whatever, babes. But the good news is they do actually explain fintech big data stuff in a way that I understand, I think. So Market 76 is a program that is free for financial advisors to use. What they're doing with this software, I'm not totally sure. Maybe using it to make other financial decisions or organize. I don't know. That's not clear. But anyway, it's free, unlike other financial advising software, because it takes the data that the advisors generate, it analyzes trends from it, and it sells it to other companies. Which, my thought, and the article points out, this comes with some possible privacy issues. They say they anonymize the data, but you would have to just trust that they're doing that correctly. Also, I don't think the idea of selling user data is terribly popular with the general public, but what do I know? Maybe I'm too woke. Eden says in the interview, Market 76 consulted with compliance lawyers to make sure they met a regulatory standard, but also met their own ethical standards. That does not give me confidence, knowing their ethical standards and their lawyers that they employ. That's not looking good. The business filings are interesting. For the most part, it's only Ethan Eden listed on all of these business filings in the annual reports. But then in 2023 and 2025, Michelle Page is listed as the person who filed this annual report. And then in 2024, the filer was actually Christopher Page. So I'm just going to spitball here. I'm just going to speculate here. 2023 is after Dragon Curve DiFi. So it looks like they're picking up their losses from Dragon Curve DiFi. Eden is still letting the Pages help him out with other businesses, and this other business after all the Dragon Curve fiasco. So if Eden didn't trust the pages, this would not be happening. He would still be alone on Market 76. Anyway, we can continue to go back in time to Chapter 3. He has his mother's eyes and her investors. So before all of these companies, Ethan Eden actually worked with his mother at her company's financial advisory firm called Diastole Wealth Management. So according to the articles, this is how he got the idea for Market 76, is that he was using whatever financial advisory software and he was like, this sucks, I'm going to make something better. And that's why he created Market 76. And I'm talking about this company not just to verify my claims of him being a nepo baby, but also because in 2021, they got into a little bit of trouble, which is around the same time as all of the Dragon Curve stuff started blowing up. So just keep that in mind. These people got a lot going on during and right after COVID. So in this instance, his mother actually got in trouble because she didn't properly disclose to investors that she was going to invest some money in Ethan Eden's fintech companies. So that is a conflict of interest. If you are taking money that's supposed to go into general investments, you're supposed to be making the best choices in order to make your investors more money than if you invest just in your kids' lemonade stand, So anyway, that's why it's a conflict of interest. They also failed to disclose that fund investments, so the money that they put in, could and would be used to pay off loans Diastole had made to the son's company. The company isn't named specifically in the filings. Based on the description, it looks like Market 76, but then it talks about starting a company that he intended to acquire or merge with other companies, so it could have been any of these, Market 76, DiFi, and or Dragon Curve, that Diastole gave the money to and invested in. The document says many of Diastole's longtime individual clients knew of Ethan Eden, either from the time he worked at Diastole or from his childhood, which, if you'll recall from episode 1, Ethan Eden mentioned in his deposition that the owners of DiFi were himself, Michelle Page, and, quote, a group of investors, smaller investments by private investors that are kind of friends and family of mine. So maybe this is what he was talking about. It basically, his mom and whoever's investing in his mom's company, then they're giving it to DiFi. And this is the result. They're getting in trouble for it. I think this Ethan Eden's deposition for the Dragon Curve case was taken at about the same time as all of this stuff came up about his mother's company. It also looks like they withheld information just in general about the funds and the investments and where the money is and where they're putting the money during these few years where they were giving it to Ethan Eden's companies. That's how I'm reading the report, is that they just kind of stopped talking to their investors. That's not great if you want to keep investors, to not tell them what you're doing. The report also said that as late as 2017, Diastole didn't have properly written PMPs covering conflict of interest, which is if you start a company that's managing millions of dollars, you can't just run it like an Etsy shop, babe. Across the board, is this just something that rich people do? Just don't keep up with any paperwork, and then when they get fines, they just pay them? Easier than doing all this paperwork and actually being ethical. Anyway, only Ethan Eden's mom got in trouble for this. Eden didn't. And as part of the settlement, his mom had to pay a fine, and she was barred from acting as chief compliance officer and had to hire an outside compliance expert, which I don't know how she could have been the owner and the chief compliance officer at the same time in the first place. How does that make sense? That's letting the wolf watch your sheep. Compliance is supposed to protect the investors from the greed of the company and the owners of the company. So the owners of the company are the compliance officers. They're not going to do anything. Whatever. That looks like the only regulatory event on her record. So that's good, I guess. Maybe her son was just having a really hard time and she slipped a little bit trying to help her one and only son. But It seems like kind of starting and like radiating out from this Dragon Curve Di-Fi thing. A lot of different businesses and a lot of different people are getting in trouble around this same like one action. If I were them, I would stop making new freaking companies. I'd go choose something else to do. But anyway, guys, this was a little bit of a short one. But it doesn't matter. They're all dropping at the same time. So if you want to hear more, you can hear more.
The views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host. The podcast is intended for general information and entertainment purposes only. The content provided is based on publicly available records. The podcast, host, and creators make no accusations, implications, or charges of any crime, wrongdoing, or unethical behavior whatsoever. The host has little to no knowledge of justice system norms, and any opinions stated are for the purposes of humor only. Please do not contact anyone mentioned in the podcast.